Hi Year 10, welcome to this lesson on Macbeth. This is part of your English literature course, and I know that we've read it, I know that we've done some interleaved schemes of work on it, but I think it would be really useful for you to use this reading lesson to pause, have a look at some of the key summaries and the key scenes. I'm going to be doing this in stages, so this is a mini lesson that goes through summary, plot, consolidation, and then a reading of the actual text. But all I'm starting with is Act 1, just to refresh your memory. So as it says there, this is a reading lesson. It's not going to be really directed by me in terms of lots of instruction. You're going to listen to me read. And first of all, I'm going to start with a summary of each scene, and I'm going to do that for Act 1, Scene 1 up to Scene 7. It's quite a long act, and we know that's because it's setting the foundations for the murder of King Duncan. So the first slides that you're going to see in black are a summary of each scene. But after that, it's really important to read the Shakespearean language as it was intended, because that would be exactly what's going to come up in your exam. So just a brief recap. For your English literature, paper 1, Shakespeare in the 19th century novel. Section A is a scene, a key passage, maybe a soliloquy or a duologue between two people from the text, and then you will write about that in the first bullet point, and in the second bullet point you will tell me or tell the examiner how that passage is integral and how it speaks to the rest of the play. So why that passage might be there, it might be the witches, and then you can use the theme of the supernatural that will be hinted at in the question or given you directly in the question in order to explore other occurrences of the supernatural or strange goings on within Shakespeare's tragedy. So that's how this lesson will go. There won't be much instruction from me. I'm going to do readings. What I suggest that you do is listen, pause, read it yourself, and there are mini tasks in each corner. So let's get going. So on the next slides you're going to see an Act 1 summary. There's going to be a more detailed look at what happens in each scene rather than me just reading little snippets to you. I want you to have a full knowledge of the plot before we see the Shakespearean language. Now, as you look at each act summary, I'll have listed some things for you to notice. So in there'll be character developments, there'll be things that a company might ask when they first go through the play together at the start of a rehearsal. Now, the reason I've taken all this information from the Royal Shakespeare Company is because it was meant to be performed. So if you are looking and listening to this lesson now, you want to think that Shakespeare was meant not necessarily to be read, yes, by the actors, but it's meant to be watched, absorbed. A lot of people back then wouldn't have had access to reading, obviously, and they would use the theatre as a piece of spectacle to go and be entertained, to go and be scared, to go and fall in love with the actors on the stage. So I'm just going to give you a minute. Work through the next summaries with me. I'm just going to read them and you're going to list 4 things that you learn from each of the summaries of each of the scenes just for Act 1. It's a really good idea to have a copy of the play nearby. It is freely accessible online on Spark Notes, and it's got a modern day translation, or Cliff Notes, but you have access to the play if you can just search it. So it's a good idea to have that now. Right, let's get going. Act 1, Scene 1. The play opens with 3 witches gathering amidst thunder and lightning. They plan to meet with Macbeth that evening, when the battle's lost and won, and at the set of sun. Simple task, list 4 things you learn about this scene. Act 1, Scene 2. At King Duncan's camp, a wounded captain tells the king that brave Macbeth fought well against the rebel forces led by MacDonald. He also reports that there was a fresh assault from the Norwegian troops after they had defeated MacDonald, but Macbeth and Banquo doubly redoubled strokes upon the foe and pushed them back as well. Duncan thanks the captain for the honour of his words and his wounds and sends him to be treated by a surgeon. Ross arrives from Fife with further news of victory. The Norwegian king is pleading for a peace treaty and has paid a ransom, while the rebellious Thane of Cawdor has been captured. Duncan sentences Cawdor to present death and tells Ross to greet Macbeth with his former title. List 4 things you learn about Act 1, Scene 2, please. Act 1, Scene 3. The witches meet upon the heath. One has been killing pigs. Another has been insulted by a sailor's wife, so they plot to cast a spell which will disrupt the sailor's next sea journey to Aleppo. They hear Macbeth and Banquo approaching and cast a spell. The men encounter the witches that look not like the inhabitants of the earth. The witches hail Macbeth firstly by his title Thane of Glamis, then as Thane of Cawdor, and finally as king hereafter. Banquo says there is no need to fear things that sound so fair, and asks the witches for his future. They predict that his children will be kings, though thou be none. Macbeth demands to know how their prediction about him can be true when the Thane of Cawdor is still alive, but the witches vanish. Ross and Angus arrive to tell Macbeth that he has been given the title Thane of Cawdor by Duncan to thank him for his valiant efforts in the battle. Macbeth considers this supernatural soliciting. He realises that to become king, Duncan would have to die, but he thinks this is a horrid image. Then he adds in an aside that chance may crown me without my stir. Banquo and Macbeth decide to discuss the witches' prophecies at a later time. List 4 things you learn about Act 1, Scene 3. Act 1, Scene 4. King Duncan asks about the execution of Cawdor. King Duncan's son Malcolm reports that he confessed and died nobly. Macbeth and Banquo, along with Ross and Angus, join the rest of Duncan's party. Duncan thanks them both for their part in the battle and announces that his eldest son Malcolm will inherit the throne from him when he dies. Duncan then says they will visit Macbeth's castle as they travel from hence to Inverness and will celebrate there. Macbeth decides to go on ahead to tell his wife. He remarks to himself that Malcolm is now a step on which I must fall down or else overleap to get to the throne. List 4 things you learn about Act 1, Scene 4. Act 1, Scene 5. Lady Macbeth reads a letter from her husband about his encounter with the witches. She fears that her husband is too full of the milk of human kindness to catch the nearest way of achieving the throne. She wants him to come home quickly so that she can pour her words of ambition into his ears. She is interrupted by news that the king is coming to the castle that evening and that Macbeth is already on his way. She celebrates the fatal entrance of Duncan into their home. She calls on the spirits to unsex her and make her capable of murder. Macbeth arrives home and Lady Macbeth immediately plants the seed of her murderous intentions. She advises him to hide their plans with innocence, but be a serpent underneath. List 4 things you learn about Act 1, Scene 5. Act 1, Scene 6. Duncan and the Thanes arrive at Macbeth's castle and enjoy the gentle surroundings. Duncan is delighted to see the honoured hostess, Lady Macbeth. She welcomes him into their home, taking him to see Macbeth. List 4 things you learn about Act 1, Scene 6. Act 1, Scene 7. Outside the banqueting hall, Macbeth considers his complex thoughts about killing Duncan. He struggles with his conscience and decides not to go through with it because it is only his vaulting ambition that is pushing him onwards. Lady Macbeth tells him off for leaving the hall. When Macbeth tells her that he has decided against killing Duncan, she is furious, calling him a coward and a beast. She goads him by saying that she would have dashed the brains out of her own baby if she had promised it to him. Macbeth is further persuaded by the strength of their plan. She will give Duncan's 2 guards so much wine that they'll lie as in death, allowing Duncan to be an unguarded target for Macbeth to attack in the night. They will frame the guards for Duncan's murder by covering their daggers in Duncan's blood. The final step of the plan is for Lady Macbeth and Macbeth to act horrified on the discovery of the murder and clamour roar upon his death. Macbeth is settled to kill Duncan. List 4 things you learn about the final scene in Act 1. Okay, so you've just had a summary of the entirety of Act 1. It's really suspenseful, it's really tense. It builds up a picture of the dichotomy between Macbeth being a noble, honourable soldier, brave Macbeth who brandishes his steel and defeats the enemies of Scotland, to a character who is on a journey, definitely helped by his wife, to become a murderous, disloyal, dishonourable traitor. So now what I'm going to do is read you 4 or 5 key scenes just from Act 1, and it'll vary from around Act 1, Scene 3 all the way up to the iconic passages in Scene 5 and Scene 7. Now, tips for this. Can you have a look? Use this lesson to listen to me read these passages from previous exams. Shakespeare is notoriously difficult for students only because we don't talk in early modern English anymore. So when you're doing that, listen to how I read it. So try and figure out the tone and the intended way of thinking. How is that character feeling? Can you tell by the way I'm reading it out? And next, I would like you to read and read again. Pause it. Try reading the speech for yourself. I would like you to locate where the passage is. Now, it gives you a little blurb at the top of which scene it is. Is it pre, post-murder? And why is that important to the narrative arc? Now, interestingly, I'm going to do this for every act of the entire play. So all of these scenes are before the murder of King Duncan. It's an act that has 7 scenes in. So we've all got them pre-murder. Why is it important that we've got this build-up? What does each scene add on to? Okay. Act 1, Scene 3. At this point in the play, Macbeth and Banquo come across 3 witches in the heath near the battlefield. So foul and fair a day I have not seen. How far is it to Forres? What are these so withered and so wild in their attire that they look not like the inhabitants of the earth, and yet are on it? Live you? Or are you aught that man may question? You seem to understand me by each at once, her choppy finger laying upon her skinny lips. You should be women, and yet your beards forbid me to interpret that you are so. So pause it here, try and read it through yourself. I want you to figure out why Shakespeare might have started with so foul and fair a day. We've got this oxymoronic language, and I want you to figure out the tone of Banquo's nature here. What is he looking at, and why is that important to the theme of the supernatural throughout the play? You could also take this moment to analyse some of the language and form here. We've got a lot of pronoun use from Banquo, so have a look at that. You could copy this out, that would be a great exercise, and choose to highlight words that stand out to you. Act 1, Scene 3. At this point in the play, Macbeth and Banquo have just spoken with the witches, and Macbeth has been told he will be king. Two truths are told as happy prologues to the swelling act of the imperial theme. I thank you, gentlemen. This supernatural soliciting cannot be ill, cannot be good. If ill, why hath it given me earnest of success commencing in a truth? I am Thane of Cawdor. If good, why do I yield to that suggestion whose horrid image doth unfix my hair and make my seated heart knock at my ribs against the use of nature? Present fears are less than horrible imaginings. My thought, whose murder yet is but fantastical, shakes so my single state of man that function is smothered in surmise, and nothing is but what is not. Use this time again. Analyse what I've just said. How is Macbeth using his language to question? How is he using asides to show his nature at this time? Act 1, Scene 5. At this point in the play, Lady Macbeth is speaking. She has just heard about the witch's prophecy that Macbeth will be king. Yet, do I fear thy nature? It is too full of the milk of human kindness to catch the nearest way. Thou wouldst be great, art not without ambition, but without the illness that should attend it. What thou wouldst highly, thou wouldst holily, thou wouldst not play false, and yet wouldst wrongly win. Thou'st have great glamis, that which cries, thus thou must do if thou have it, and that which rather thou dost fear to do than wishes should be undone. Hie thee hither, that I may pour my spirits in thine ear, and chastise with the valour of my tongue all that impedes thee from the golden round, which fate and metaphysical aid doth seem to have thee crowned withal. Okay, use this time to figure out Lady Macbeth's tone and her intention and how she feels about her husband and herself. Have a look at some of the metaphorical language, particularly the golden round. Act 1, Scene 7. At this point in the play, Macbeth is on stage alone and considering whether or not to kill Duncan. If it were done, when 'tis done, then 'twere well it were done quickly. If the assassination could trammel up the consequence and catch with his success, that but this blow might be the be-all and end-all here. But here, upon this bank and shoal of time, we jump the life to come. But in these cases, we still have judgment here, that we but teach bloody instructions, which, being taught, return to plague the inventor. This even-handed justice commends the ingredients of our poisoned chalice to our own lips. He's here in double trust. First, as I am his kinsman and his subject, strong both against the deed, then as his host, who should against his murderer shut the door, not bear the knife myself. Besides, This Duncan hath borne his faculties so meek, hath been so clear in his great office, that his virtues will bleed like angels, trumpet-tongued against the deep damnation of his taking off. So this is part of a really dramatic soliloquy that's an aside at the end of this act. Definitely use your text for it to continue. Lady Macbeth enters after this with her iconic speech. So definitely continue in your studies to look at that. And here's some more from this scene. I've not covered the whole scene, but Act 1, Scene 7, I've spent some time in it, and I'd like you to as well. And that's because it's come up on the exam a lot. It's just before the Act 2 dramatic opener in Act 1 and Act 2, Scene 2 of Duncan's murder. But at this point in the play, Macbeth and Lady Macbeth are in conversation. She's just interrupted him. And Macbeth has just informed Lady Macbeth that he does not think they should kill Duncan. And this is her response. Was the hope drunk wherein you dressed yourself? Hath it slept since? And wakes it now to look so green and pale at what it did so freely? From this time, such I account thy love. Art thou afeard to be the same in thine own act and valour as thou art in desire? Wouldst thou have that which thou esteemest the ornament of life, and live a coward in thine own esteem, letting I dare not wait upon I would, like the poor cat in the adage? Prithee, peace, I dare do all that may become a man, who dares do more is none. So in this duologue, we've got a conversation between man and wife. That's really, really interesting that the majority of the conversation is taken over by Lady Macbeth here. So her powerful role in Act 1 is really, really important for your studies. And finally, thank you for sticking with me during this reading. What I want you to do is really read the passages. So if you haven't got access to the text, you've now got some Shakespearean language in front of you on this lesson. So pause it, or you can listen to my audio version. You could create your own plot summary. Create a comic strip, a mind maps, do it in bullet points. Just refresh yourself. This is just Act 1 and it's so rich that you could really take your time over that. Also, if you log on to Cliff Notes, Spark Notes, they're great places to read the text and just have a look at some summaries. There's lots and lots of versions of Macbeth on YouTube that's freely accessible. I really recommend the Michael Fassbender movie, so enjoy that as well. And remember, it's meant to be enjoyed, it's meant to be shocking, it's a tragedy, it's got this arc that ends in such drama that you're really supposed to enjoy and see it as a piece of entertainment and theatre. So I hope you're all staying safe and well. I'll keep uploading as much as I possibly can. We are all missing you in the English department. We can't wait till normal service resumes. But we will adapt. We'll adapt to a new normal. So take care. Drop me some messages in the comments about how I can improve, what will help you more. But definitely pay attention to the instructions in all of the lessons so far. Bye.